Start the recording. Okay. So last week we ended off. It was Jesus's first words in the Gospel of Mark, right? So John is put into prison. This is kind of where we're left off here, right? So John's in prison. Jesus is coming back from Samaria at this point. That's what the Gospel of John tells us, and he's coming back to Galilee, and he's basically kickstarting the beginning of his Galilean ministry. We talked about he was in Cana for a little bit, but remember he had that conversation with Mary. Said, woman, it's not time yet. Hold on. My time's not here. But this seems to be the time. This is, as John fades away, this is where Jesus kicks in his ministry into overdrive. And so that's where we left off. That's where we are right now. And so that ended off at verse 15. So verse 16, I'm going to read 16 to 20, and then we'll circle back and then break those down. So, and as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." They immediately left their nets and followed him. When he had gone a little farther from there, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who also were in the boat mending their nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat and with the hired servants and went after him. Right. So, high level, Jesus is calling his first disciples at this point. Looking at this, we're going to go verse by verse, as we have been, but looking at this, what stands out about this, about who Jesus calls these first four people?
Immediately
is in there. Yep. And we're gonna dive into that, but there's something about these people, right? There's something about these people specifically that he's calling.
Well, they were brothers, and they were all fishermen.
Yep. They were fishermen. So the first four that he picks are fishermen. This is really significant, and we're gonna dive into this of there's symbolism that's happening here as Jesus is calling them. So we get to this first part, and Jesus calls Simon and Andrew first. And so why do you think Jesus is calling them first?
Well, weren't they John the Baptist? Weren't they with him?
One was. Andrew was.
Andrew?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Andrew was an early follower of John the Baptist, and he's the one that actually brought Simon to John and to Jesus. So I actually have that out of John 1. And so this is kind of describing the initial first calling of the disciples from John's gospel. It says, one of the two who had heard John, being John the Baptist, speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated the Christ, and he brought him to Jesus.
Yes.
And so Andrew was the one who had initially gone out and sought out John the Baptist, had heard what John the Baptist was saying, went out on his own, saw what was going on, and then went out back to his brother and said, "You've got to see this. You have to see what's going on here." Because we go a little bit further back in this, John at this point, John the Baptist sees Jesus, walking by, and he points him out. It's like, there's the Lamb of God. There it is. So John the Baptist had called out Jesus as a Messiah. Andrew was one of the first to recognize that Jesus was the Messiah, and he was being this natural evangelist, which is what Andrew did. This is what he was good at, was calling people over. And the first person that he did was his brother. He heard the good news, and the first thing that he wanted to do was go to the person probably closest to him, because they work together, right? Yeah. So we get this part, this telling of this story. They're together out on the boat. They're working with each other. They're probably without each other every single day. And the first person he wants to tell is his brother. He goes out to his brother and it's like, "I've just heard something amazing. You've got to come hear this guy. You've got to see him. This is who we've been waiting for. This is the guy." And so Simon, follows, he follows him, he listens to him. And, we know the story of Simon. Simon becomes, Peter, he gets the name Cephas, which means rock, and he becomes the rock that the church was built off of. This is what, he becomes one of the most stalwart supporters of Jesus. But we have this whole redemption story in there, which we don't really get into all that much in Mark. But you know, there we have to look at these 12 that are called, and we don't know a ton about a lot of them, but the ones that we do know about, we look at their character, and they're not perfect people. They're just like us, and we get little snippets a lot. We actually learn a lot about Andrew and Peter's life, just because we have this Gospel of Mark, Peter's central figure in basically all the Gospels. But these were not rich people. Simon and Andrew were basically dirt poor. There's the story where they basically can't even pay. They're behind on their taxes. I can't remember which gospel it's out of. It might be Luke, but they're behind on their taxes, and the Pharisees are using this as another excuse to go after Jesus, and they're saying to Jesus, you've got these followers, they don't even pay their taxes, like they're deadbeats, they're scum. This is who you're associating yourself with. Jesus says, go cast out the fish, and or cast out your net, and the first fish you're going to pull up, there's going to be enough money in that fish's mouth for you to pay your taxes. So this is the type of people that Jesus called first. They're dead broke. They are just barely able to hold on. They're we talked about the tax collectors and how much burden was being put onto them, onto the average person with the no bid contracts that are essentially happening. Actually, I don't think we talked about that, but I think when we start talking about Levi, we'll start diving into that. But there's like these no bid contracts that are basically happening with these tax collectors, and they're allowed to overcharge and keep the extra. This is what the Romans are allowing them to do, and so this is one of the reasons why tax collectors are so hated. And so Simon and Andrew cannot pay their bills. They're barely able to survive. They're headstrong, stubborn. We see that a lot with Peter, yet this is the first two people that Jesus calls. And so besides them being fishermen, we also have them as flawed people, too, that these are not people that anybody would necessarily, in that moment, look at them and say, oh, I would just want to be just like Simon and Andrew, right? Everybody kind of looks at them, probably would feel sorry for them, the life that they were living. Okay. So, So we get this, these little details here, right? So we get Simon and Andrew, right? And then they're casting a net into the sea, right? So this is really significant of what's actually happening here. You guys pick up on this at all of the symbolism that's happening when Jesus calls them, they're casting a net into the sea.
Sure. Right, and he says you will be fishers of men.
Yeah.
So that symbolism is that you're casting for fish now, but so that symbolizes that they're trying to reach the multitudes, right? Fishermen are trying to get a big catch.
Yep. And so Jesus actually talks about this in the parable of the dragnet, out of Matthew that I want to read. So this is Matthew 13:47-50. This is Jesus speaking, and he says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a fishing net that was thrown into the water and caught fish of every kind. When the net was full, they dragged it up on the shore, sat down, and sorted the good fish into crates, but threw the bad ones away. That is the way it will be at the end of the world. The angels will come and separate the wicked people from the righteous, throwing the wicked into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so, there's this symbolism here as these eventually become these amazing evangelists. They go out, they spread the gospel, they spread the good news. Peter, the Catholics look at him as the first pope. This is the first guy that went out there that really put the roots down of this budding church in the first century. And so Jesus explains what this kingdom is like, and they're casting out a net. They're not looking at the school of fish and saying, I think there's 95% good fish in here. They're just casting out the net and pulling them all in, and then they get sorted later. And so I brought this up because I think I told you when the jail that I was at, it was on the coast of Virginia. So this is all like 99% of the guys there were fishermen. At some point in their life, they had been out on a boat. They understood this, right? And so they were workers. Not any of them that I ever really talked to owned a boat. So they would go out, they would cast out this the drag net, they put out the traps, and then they would bring it up on the boat. Who's the person there that's deciding what fish they're going to keep or what they're going to throw away?
The guy who's paying for the fish.
Yeah, it's the captain.
In Matthew or here?
Just in general.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so no, you're right, Diane. It's the guy who's paying the
money
boat.
maker,
it's the captain.
Money fish, the money fish.
Yeah.
It's the captain of that boat is the one that's deciding. And so this is what Jesus is saying is cast out this net. You're not the one that's going to judge. That's not your job. Your job is to cast the net, bring them in, and then I'm going to be the one to judge. And we get this out of the book of Revelations, and chapter 20, 11, and I saw a great white throne and the one sitting on it. The one, this is being, Jesus. The earth and sky fled from his presence, but they found no place to hide. I saw the dead, both great and small, standing before God's throne, and the books were open, including the book of life, and the dead were judged according to what they had done as recorded in the books. And so we're not we look at this section of verses here. This doesn't say we're going to be the ones judging. That's not our job. We do not judge. We don't get to decide who deserves God's grace and who doesn't. Who's going to be able to be a good Christian? Who's going to be able to be a good believer? That is not our job. Our job is to cast out the dragnet and then bring them all in and let God sort it out. That's God's job. Our job is not to judge. And I think that is it's a really important part of that the fishermen at this time would have understood this. It is not their place. That they will eventually be sorted, but the sorting does not happen when you're casting out the net. That is done by the owner of the ship. That happens afterwards. Mario, you want to say something?
Yeah, in correlation to the scripture also, it talks about the casting of the net and the fishing is also the labor of evangelism isn't easy. There are going to be days that you may reach a soul. There may be days that you don't get, that you reach a whole bunch, and there's days that you don't catch any.
Yep.
That you don't. Evangelism is not easy, especially street evangelism or evangelism in different places is not easy because there's sometimes isn't anybody that you get to witness to or whatever, but it's the persistence. Fishermen are persistent.
Yep.
There's very few times that they just bring the net up and they go, let me not do that. With the exception of when Jesus was cooking breakfast on the beach and he told them, listen, cast it on the other side. And right away, Peter's reaction was, I do this for a living. I know how to do this.
Yeah.
But Jesus showed him that, when he's leading the way, you're going to catch, there's potential to catch abundance to the point of breaking the net.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I think it's another reason again why Jesus chose these fishermen is because this is not easy work. This is difficult work, and like Mario said, they understood that some days you're going to catch some, other days you're going to catch none. But it's about persistence. It's about keeping going. Just because that one spot didn't work doesn't mean you don't ever go there again. Might not have been the right time, and it might not have been the right time of day. There could have been other issues that are going on. They'll go back, and so Jesus, there was a lot of meaning behind picking these first four as being fishermen because they understood. Go ahead.
I was going to say that, Matt, that if you start right from the beginning, Jesus was shaking things up. He with all the, for us reading it, we can see all the, what were you saying? Symbolism. But imagine the people that lived at that time seeing him, look at his followers, look at who his followers are. So he shook it up with the people that said, wow, those people were chosen by Jesus, and maybe I could be chosen too.
Yep.
And then the Pharisees, of course, are saying, why wouldn't I be the ones to be with Jesus? He should have come to us first. So there's so many layers to this. We could dissect it for a month.
Yeah. Oh, because there's I don't remember which gospel this is out of, but it's Jesus is he's at the temple, right? And he sees this there's a Pharisee that comes up, and he's looking at this like destitute man, right? That is struggling with sin. He's struggling where his position is, and the Pharisee goes up, kind of looks at the other guy, and he's like, thank God that I'm not that guy. I'm so much better than him. He's looking down at him and saying, at least I'm not him. I'm a good person. I'm not this guy. And then the sinner says, he repents. He recognizes his own sin. He recognizes his fallen nature, and turns to Jesus and says, I'm not a good person. I've made some mistakes in my life. And Jesus looks at him and basically says, like, you're the one that's going to inherit the kingdom, not this guy, because you actually understand of where you are. Romans tells us, I think it's in Romans 3, right? None are righteous. None. All fall short of the glory of God.
Right.
There is no one that is righteous, but the problem is the Pharisees consider themselves righteous, and this was a big issue, and I think one of the reasons why, we're going to start seeing the Pharisees start popping up, and they're going to be a reoccurring theme, throughout the entire gospel, is because it's easier for us to look, it's easier for us to look at it and say, wow, I'm never going to be that person. I'm not like that at all. But we do have this tendency to, take pride in our own salvation, to take pride in our own grace. There's the parable of the workers, right? Where, the master of the field goes out and he grabs these people, these day laborers, right? And he grabs the first thing in the morning, right? He says, I'm going to pay you a full day's wage. And, they're like, okay, they work. And the man keeps going out, every watch, right? Till he gets out to the absolute last hour and says, hey, come out, work this 1 hour. I'll give you the full wage. Right. And he comes out and he pays everybody the exact same. No matter how hard they worked. The people that had worked all day is like, what is going on here? How is that fair? We busted our butt all day. They came in at the last second and they got paid the same as me. And the owner of the field says, what right do you have to question what I'm going to do with my money? And Jesus putting this, what right do we have to have, questioning what Jesus or God is going to do with his grace? This is his grace to give. It's not ours. Okay, yeah. So Luke 18. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was listening to Lee Strobel today, and he was talking about how he witnessed to an 87-year-old man, and that man accepted Christ, and when he did, they were going to go have dinner someplace, and he ended up having a stroke. And,
Yeah, they were going to throw a party. I heard the same thing this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were celebrating
They were
at the very last, pretty much down to the wire of his life.
Yep.
And he
Yep.
finally accepted Jesus Christ. Amen to that.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's that's the point of that parable from Jesus with the parable of the workers, is like we all get the same, we all get that salvation. It goes back to this the fishing part aspect of it, right? Is like, as long as we're out there in this great commission, everybody can receive that salvation. We don't need to be like the Pharisees, and that is a big warning to us, is to not be like them and try to be gatekeepers of salvation. Because we're not the gatekeepers. That is not what we do. That, again, with this whole casting of the net, the dragnet parable, it is not our position to judge. That is God's alone, because none of us can have a leg to stand on. All of us are sinners. All of us fall short of the glory of God. We are only declared righteous through the blood of Christ. That's it, period. We don't get to boast in that because it was a gift given to us. Paul makes that really, really clear in Romans, because that's what, again, what the Pharisees were trying to do is like, look at all the stuff that I do. I'm righteous. You're not, because I'm so much better than you because I follow the laws. God loves me more. That's not true. God loves everybody the exact same. That's just the way it is. That is how God loves.
Okay,
Right.
but I'm still God's favorite. I don't care what anybody says.
Okay.
No, God's favorite, Denise. Please said that I'm God's favorite.
We're all God's favorite. All right. Okay, so now we get into red letters here on verse 17. It says, then Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." So we already kind of talked about this fishers of men part. But this first command that he gives them, right? The first things out of his mouth when he sees them fishing, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." So what is Jesus saying by follow me? Because I think there's two things that he's saying here.
Be my disciples.
Yep.
And follow my example.
Yep.
Yep. You're going to become teachers as well as me.
Yep. No, that's it. So drop everything that you're doing, follow me. Physically wherever I'm going, but also look at my example. He hasn't told them yet. We get into that later in the gospel that he's going to die, that he's not going to be with them forever. Physically at least. So he is training them. I think I mentioned it last week that when we start getting into chapter 8, chapter 9 of Mark, Jesus does a radical change of his ministry at this point. He starts to reduce the size of his crowds. He's starting to make sure that he's only keeping he's spending a lot more time with his disciples at this point because he knows that he's coming up on the end of his ministry, and he's making sure they are prepared for what comes next. He starts some very, very difficult teachings, not just with the disciples, but with the crowds that are coming as well, because he knows that it is not going to be for the faint of heart once he's gone.
Matt?
Yeah.
What I always found interesting is, when you're talking about that in verse 17, when he said, "Follow me." I mean, 2 words. He didn't tell him anything.
Yep.
And to think, and when I read this, when I have read this before, I always thought, would I do that? Would I drop everything? Because they did. They walked away from family and
Yep.
Helping their father, and they walked away from everything. And he didn't explain nothing.
Yep.
Just 2 words, "Follow me."
Yeah.
And that's just another testimony to his authority, that when he speaks the word that is spoken from him is taken with authority. And I think that with these men, they realized that there was something very, very special about this person. And that calling had to happen for them, because they spread the gospel across the world.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but don't forget, Diane, I mean, it still goes back to the same basis. We all have free will. We have seen
Right. But once they had
very
faith in
great
him,
people in our lives, but it still comes down to the question: would you stop your life and pick up everything and follow someone? I mean, I don't know.
what Jesus was offering made people hungry and thirsty at the time.
But he didn't offer anything at this point.
I know, it just said, "Follow me." So that was
He hadn't
unconditional.
Yeah, but he was still creating an example before he was still creating the bustle it right from the beginning. And you know how you see somebody and they're special?
Well,
I
yes,
think we've all felt that you just know that person's special.
right, but this goes back to the same thing Matt's talking about. When he talks about evangelism, we go all the time, but you don't we have no idea who we touch and who we don't touch.
Right?
And yeah, even people when we're, you know, and someone might think of that with someone else. I mean, but it still comes down to that one moment in time to make
think-
that decision.
Go
So,
ahead, Jenny. Go ahead. Let Jenny.
Oh, that's
talk.
all right.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
very good.
I think the even like Marie, you're talking about like they left their lives. I think it's even more profound just to look at in that exact moment. They literally were in the middle of doing something.
Yeah.
They didn't just,
Mhm.
it wasn't like they were just sitting on the street corner and he said, "Hey, come follow me. I got something cool to do." They're in the middle of working.
And that's actually the
dropped
next
everything.
part. You know, they immediately the key word here, they left their nets. Like there's big significance of them leaving their nets. This is their livelihood.
Yes.
They've dropped literally everything to follow him. And so, I think, to Diane's point, yeah, I think they knew that they knew he was something special. They at least Andrew had been around and seen John call him out as the Lamb of God. They might have not, completely understood what that meant at that point. It's pretty obvious as we get later into this when they're coming closer on Jesus's death that they didn't necessarily understand what that meant. But there was something about him. But it's still like really, really significant that they actually did do this.
So that's the first walking out in faith, right?
Yep.
That's the first we see walking in faith, not knowing where it's going to lead you and leaving everything behind. And when that's what Jesus tells us over and over, you're doing everything by faith of what is not seen. But to some credit to Jesus in the time, there's already been talk about the things he's different from everyone else. He acts different. And then some people are even acknowledging him at that point as a Messiah.
Yeah. And, remember we go back, culturally of what the Jews think the Messiah is going to be at this point too. They think he's going to be a military leader.
Mm-hmm.
They think he is going to be this one that is going to overthrow Roman rule with a sword,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, they when they follow Jesus, they're expecting one thing, but it's a continuous act of faith when they start seeing it's like, where's this guy's sword? He's got the crowds, but he's not spurring them up for a revolution. He's talking about loving your enemy and being peaceful. And he's talking about a kingdom, but he's not talking necessarily about a physical kingdom, and these are really difficult things. And there's a point, I was talking about it, right, where Jesus starts giving these really difficult teachings and he's starting to thin down the crowd towards the end of his ministry. And there's a point where everybody else basically leaves because Jesus says it's one of his most difficult parables. Like, you have to hate everyone around you to be able to love me, right? He doesn't use the word hate as we do. He talks basically about saying you have no regard. You have to hate your wife to love your wife. Right. And people are like, that doesn't make any sense at all. How can you even say that? But he's saying, don't have any regards, don't have any expectations for them, because love is supposed to be unconditional. That is what he was saying. So everybody's like, this guy's a lunatic. He's saying stupid stuff right now. We're just going to walk away. So everybody walks away except for the 12. And the 12 come up to him, and Simon's the first one up there, and Jesus says, "Aren't you going to leave too?" And Simon's like, "Where are we going to go? We've already left everything. Like, we're in for the long haul on this one. Like, we're here. So explain this to us and like let us know what you're talking about, because we know that it's not what it seems, right?" They understood how Jesus talked in parables, and we get into this a little bit later in I think second or third chapter, where it's explained why Jesus actually talks in parables. It is a way to get past people that have hardened hearts. That's basically the big reason about it, that somebody can't just accidentally stumble onto faith, that you have to have an open heart to be able to understand these parables. So I want to move on, so we can get into verse So verse 19, right? So Jesus is still, he's still walking around, right? He's like on the sea line of the coast of Galilee. We know he's near Capernaum based off, when we get to verse 21. So it says, when he had gone a little farther from there, he saw James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, who were also in the boat mending their nets. So as Jenny pointed out, like again, they're in the middle of stuff right now. So who's, I think the first question we can ask is like, who's Zebedee, right? I think this name kind of pops up again a little bit later, but does anybody know who Zebedee is?
Um, wasn't, was his something with Mary?
Yeah, he's a Galilean fisherman, obviously, but he's the husband of Salome, and Salome is the sister, we believe, of Mary, and so that would make Zebedee Jesus's uncle. If it's the same Salome, it's the same people. I think we get that towards in the Passion Week, where there's a Salome who's named as the mother of James and John, is and is being Mary's sister. And so this we can start seeing now there's a relation here, and this is one of the things that I've always kind of wanted to dig into, and it's on my list of what is so special about Mary's family. You look at Mary's chosen to be the vessel, to be the pure vessel, the Virgin Mother, and then you also have James and John out of this as well, right? And like you even have Zachariah, be his father, right? There's something very special about Mary's family, and there's I believe when we look at some of the genealogy of it, there is she's a descendant of Aaron too. So there, I think there's that part of it there. But there's obviously God looked at this family and saw something very special in them to choose all of them, that they all came to Jesus all at the same time. So I always just found that really interesting, that this family was so set apart.
Yeah, Mary, Salome, I guess is the way they pronounce it, was one of the three Marys at the cross. It was Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and then Mary Salome. I believe James and John were also cousins, of Jesus, so they were part of the lineage. They're also part of the lineage of the priesthood, of the original priesthood, of the Levitical priesthood. So it was like that changing of the guard that was taking place also, from the Mosaic covenant into the covenant of the New Testament covenant of Jesus. So you see that transition there also. If you got to really peel back the layers to find it, but if you do, some of the genealogy studies, which are very, anyway, they're tough, but you could trace some things back to show, like you said, that God had put his eye on this family, and had blessed them to carry on the lineage that was going forward.
Yep. And I don't want to get too much on a rabbit hole on this one. Mark doesn't go into any of the genealogy, but if you do look at some of the genealogy, notice when the women are mentioned in there, because generally the women are not mentioned in the genealogy, but when they are, it's very significant. And we see that Rahab, the prostitute, is in the messianic lineage, right? So this shows again that Jesus is not just for the righteous, because there are none. Jesus is part of this lineage of broken people that found redemption, that found salvation through God. So it's really interesting when you start diving into that lineage. Okay, so now we have this part here where they're mending their nets. So again, like with Simon and Andrew, right? We have they're out casting their nets, but now we get this little detail that they're mending their nets. So what is this? I think there's significance in this, that when Jesus calls them, they're mending their nets. So what do you think that means spiritually?
Well, if mending the nets, they would lose fish, so
yeah,
it would probably be the same if we don't go out and, and do our part, many people will be lost. They don't
Well,
hear the
you know,
word.
I think
If
that,
we don't go and share the word,
well, that's exactly what was happening at the time, right? And so I think that's why it's so significant is that when Jesus calls James and John, that they're mending the nets, because that's exactly what Jesus's ministry is doing, is mending the net of salvation. Because the Pharisees are sitting there, with declaring, essentially almost everyone unclean at this point. So the people that really need God's love, that really need God's salvation, are being completely missed and overlooked. The Pharisees are saying, we can't even associate with them. They consider themselves holy. So they said, we can't go talk to this guy. We can't go talk to this prostitute. We can't go talk to this beggar. We can't go talk to this this thief, this murderer, this person that actually needs God's love and salvation, because that would make me unholy. Right. And so we're going to start seeing Jesus start breaking down those barriers, but he is mending the net because the old ways, the ways that were being run by the Pharisees, were missing all of the people that really needed it. Salvation is for everyone, Jesus has the parable of, the forgiveness of a debt. Right. Right. And I don't want to butcher all the numbers, right? But there's two people. One has a very small debt. One has a very large debt. Right. And then, Jesus, I think he's talking to Peter, because Peter's the one that usually asks a question that kind of spurs Jesus into having to break it down Barney style to the disciples.
That's my Peter.
Yeah. So, and he says, Jesus asks him, who's going to be more thankful? Who's going to be happier? The one that had a little debt forgiven, or the one that had this massive debt that was unpayable? Right. And Peter's like, you got me. You're right. It's the one that had this unpayable debt. They're the ones that are going to rejoice more for having that debt forgiven. So again, Jesus is looking at these people. He doesn't just overlook all of the ones that are broken down, the overlooked part of society. That is where he went out to. That is where he focused on. Mario was talking about the street ministry. This is what he was doing. He was going out into the gutters and looking at all the people that the Pharisees had said, they're gone, they're done. We don't ever want anything to do with them. We're going to get into this in chapter 2, where Jesus tells the Pharisees, all sins will be forgiven. All of them.
Jesus was mending Jesus came to mend our sins.
Yep.
So there's another layer too, and create an upside down kingdom.
Yep. So again, we get immediately here, right? And so, I think we get another part of this detail here, that I think is really significant. So, just like Simon and Andrew, James and John showed no hesitation. They hear the words, follow me, right? And then they immediately go after Jesus. But then we look, they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and went after him. Right. So this part, I think, is really significant too here. So if we look at, we'll look at, there's two parts here. So the first thing is they left their father. What's significant about that?
They didn't seek permission to leave. They just left.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And we know John is pretty young at this point.
Well, there was somebody that Jesus told him to, he wanted to go bury his father, and he said, no, just keep following me.
Yeah. This is I've got two of them. They're both out of Matthew. So, Jesus said, in Matthew 10, if you love your father or mother more than me, you are not worthy of being mine. Or if you love your son or daughter more than me, you are not worthy of being mine. He's not saying don't love the people around you, but he's saying put God first. We get a little bit more detail in this in Matthew 8. Starting at verse 18, and this is the one that my mom was talking about. It says, when Jesus saw the crowd around him, he instructed his disciples to cross to the other side of the lake. Then one of the teachers of the religious law said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." But Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens to live in, and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to even lay his head." Another disciple said, "Lord, first let me return home and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me now. Let the spiritually dead bury their own dead." The man's father's not dead. at this point. He's basically saying, my dad's probably got a couple years left. Let me go back home and take care of some stuff, and then I'm going to come follow you. And Jesus is like, no, if you want to follow me, you have to put it all behind. And we see this actually happening with James and John here. They dive out of the boat. I'm imagining them, on kind of like a little bit out of the shore, not fishing because they're mending the net, but they're in the boat. Right. And so Jesus comes and says, follow me. They kind of look at each other and just dive into the water. And Dad's like, where are you going? We still got work to do. And they are not looking back. They're leaving everything behind, just like Simon and Andrew did when they left their nets. Again, they left their livelihood. And these were not rich people, right? We talked about Simon, being behind on taxes, not being able to pay his bills. And, we know from this next section that Simon is taking care of his mother-in-law, which is probably an indication that his father-in-law is dead.
Right.
So, he's got his, he might have kids. He's got his, he's got a lot of mouths to feed, and he's barely making it as it is. He's following Jesus, just diving out. He's putting it all behind you. They're putting God first. And so I think that's really significant of what's happening there when they're leaving their father, out of those two passages of, from Matthew. They're saying we love God first. God comes first. We're putting God before everything else. And then, we get into this little detail here, the hired servants. So what do you think this is implicate or implying here when it says they have hired servants?
Well, in essence, even in Matthew, they're to me, they're walking away from their inheritance.
Yeah. This is saying that they probably have a really successful fishing business at this point. If they have hired servants, so they're leaving behind their family and they're leaving behind their wealth and their livelihood to follow Jesus, right? And so, does anybody know the significance of James? He's the first apostle to be martyred.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Beheaded by Herod.
Right.
Herod's men. But so they put everything behind them. They left everything to follow Jesus, including giving up their lives. And remember, we talked about this, the first day, that every single one of these guys died.
Yes.
Every single one, except for John. And again, they tried. They gave it their best shot. They poisoned him. The poison didn't work.
Many times.
We get revelations out of that while he's in exile. Okay. We're good on time. Okay, so let's go on to this next part here. So verse going on to verse 21. Let me just read all of this. So 21 to 28, and then we'll go back. So then they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. Now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, "Let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet and come out of him." And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him. Then they were all amazed, so they questioned among themselves, saying, "What is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." And immediately his fame spread throughout the region around Galilee. So I want to you flip over to this map that is in the background study notes. And so can you see my mouse cursor?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, Capernaum's right here. And so, what we don't get out of this map is historically Capernaum is a major city. It is on an international trade route. It is a major fishing village. There's a Roman garrison here. There's a very specific reason why Jesus chose this specific town as his base of operations. He does more, like you can see here, he does more miracles here than any other place.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is?
Because people were receptive to it.
I think that's a big part of it, that people were receptive to it.
And there was people from all over the world there probably.
Yep.
And they would go back and tell everybody that, look what I saw.
Yep. That's exactly, I think that's the exact reason of why, you know, they are receptive to it. He's able to do all these miracles because there's so many people that believe in him there. But you know, people, there's a lot of out of towners that are there. So people are seeing this happen and they're going, you know, we get that the multitudes are coming to Jesus from all over, you know, Judea, Samaria, Decapolis, Phoenicia. They're coming from all over, you know, this, you know, 175 square mile region into Capernaum. This is where this main road goes through, and these Roman garrisons are moving out. So, you know, he's not just preaching to and showing the Jews at this point. He's also showing the Gentiles too. These Gentile Romans are also seeing this, and we do see that a little bit, that Jesus actually is able to perform miracles for one of the Gentile Roman centurions, right? So there's that miracle right there. So Jesus heals the centurion servant. So, you know, if we look at that story, this man is seeing Jesus work in Capernaum, being at this garrison. This is, you know, the commander of this garrison, more than likely. He's looking at it and he is coming to Jesus. So there's a very, very significant reason of why Jesus is here. And you know, because he's able to spread that message so far, you know, from this little village of just where it is, you know, and it's a geographically, it's an ideal location too. He goes all over Galilee. You know, we know from the messianic prophecies that Jesus's main ministry will be in Galilee. The Messiah will spend most of his time in Galilee, and from Capernaum, being this fishing village, he's able to get all over the place from there. You know, if he can pop down to, you know, all these little villages around here, they can go down the Jordan, and if they need to head up the road, which they do, to go to Tyre and Sidon, they're able to get on that main road and go straight, you know, basically straight up north. So go ahead, Mario.
I think another thing that you mentioned and you kind of just went past it is he went right against the Roman stronghold and started preaching near a Roman stronghold.
Yep.
You know, which is like, that was crazy at that time because the Romans were just, you know, taking out the Jews and everything else so quickly. But he wasn't afraid to go near the Roman stronghold and start spreading the word. And then the other thing that was significant to me is if we go to Acts chapter 2 and 3, when Peter started to minister, the same people that were part of that trade route were there on the day of Pentecost.
Yep.
And they heard Peter speaking and they heard everybody speaking, you know, and so the seed was dropped. I believe in Capernaum was a seeding ground for the gospel to start. Then when, you know, we follow up to Acts chapter 2 and 3, we start seeing that, you know what, there was a trigger that let them know, oh, this was that same guy over there that they're speaking of here. And it made, you know, there was relevancy that was brought to the gospel message that they had heard early on from Jesus himself. It just got solidified on the day of Pentecost, you know, because Jesus was, Paul said that one seeds, the other one waters, then God will bring the increase. And I think that's what we see happening. But Jesus empowered the ones that he was teaching to bring to start the harvest forward.
Yep. I think, yeah, that's a really good point there. Okay, so I think we covered Capernaum, and, you know, Capernaum is going to come up a lot. So I think it's important to kind of having a general idea of where that is too. You know, so then we get this word immediately here, right? So what do you think the significance of this use of immediately is?
I don't know.
In verse 29 or what verse?
Verse 21.
He didn't hesitate. Like,
Yeah.
this
yeah.
is the Sabbath, so typically you would defer to the priests and
Right.
do your thing for Sabbath.
Right.
I know that's not really the most eloquent way of putting it, but he's stepping into his place of authority and saying, all right, I am the teacher, so I can lead
Good point.
Sabbath
Yep.
teaching.
Yep. Good
Didn't waste
point.
any time, Matt. You didn't waste any time.
What was that?
You didn't waste any time.
Yeah. So, and that's, I think that's the biggest part of it. He's called his disciples, and then bam, he's right into Capernaum. He goes right to the synagogue on the Sabbath, which is, there's a lot of significance to him coming in and teaching on the Sabbath. So, Sabbath starts basically a few minutes before sundown on a Friday night and then ends on Saturday at nightfall. So he's popping in there. And then why do you think he's going to the synagogue and teaching on the Sabbath? What is significant about this day and this place and Jewish culture?
Well, that's when they all went to the synagogue to hear the Bible being, well, not the Bible, but their Bible being preached or
Old
read
Testament.
even.
Yep.
And that's
So
where like all the Jews are on that day.
exactly. Yeah. If he wants to talk to the Jews, he knows that they're going to be here. They're going to be receptive because this is the day that they've set aside to seek out God, to focus on God. So the ones that are actually keeping the Sabbath in their heart are going to be able to receive what he is about to say to them. So, there's actually a big significant part of him coming into the synagogue and teaching here. The synagogues at this point were basically little democracies. He couldn't just barge in with some authority and say, I'm going to go teach. They had to vote. The elders, deacons, whatever they were called, had to come together and then agree. Yeah, we'll let this guy talk.
Invite it.
Yeah. So, he's basically, we know that he had a little bit from, a little bit of fame for people that had known John. Maybe some of these people, that had voted to allow him in had seen him with John. But I think, going back to what Diane was talking about, they probably just recognized that there's something different about this guy. Because, he's coming out of the nowhere at this point, right? Like, nobody's really heard of anything that he's done. This is the beginning of his ministry, so his fame hasn't spread until basically this moment after he gives a sermon and casts out the demon. He's got no formal training. He's not coming in, as I work under so and so out of Jerusalem, and he's been a scribe for X amount of years, and I'm going to be a Pharisee, and I'm in line for the Sanhedrin. He's just like, I'm just a carpenter from this little town in Nazareth, and I just want to say some stuff. And they give him the okay. They give him thumbs up. It's like, all right, knock yourself out. And I don't think they really expected what was going to happen when he preached, what he did. So I think it's, people recognize his authority. Go ahead.
Kirk was saying that, he commanded authority, and he spoke the word so well because he is the word and he was the word. So that's how he knew it so well, because it was him. So
Yeah.
and that was all. That was his.
Yeah, and also, I did a little research on this part of it, because reading line by line, you really can dissect things. And we keep coming across that word authority with Jesus. And in Romans 13:1, they said there is no authority but what God has established. So him taking that authority, and if people knew the scripture, especially the Old Testament, one with authority was always established by God.
Yeah.
Right, from Moses to the high priesthood, that was all established by God. So anyone in a position of authority was established.
Yeah. And so, that kind of, segues into this next part here. So we don't really get, what he talks about. It's probably, it was probably very similar to all of his other teachings. When Jesus went from town to town to town, he basically said the exact same thing. And this made it easy for people to remember too. I actually was just learned this today. If you look at the Beatitudes in Greek, they actually rhyme. So when Jesus so when Jesus was saying this, and when it's being transcribed and it's being done in a way that it's easy to remember, most people at this time, they don't know how to read or write. This is an oral culture in this first century. I think I brought this up, that young men at this point prided themselves in their ability to completely memorize the entire Old Testament.
Right.
They had it, almost word for word. There was, bits and pieces. They were allowed to have a little bit of flair, but that's why they would say a story, and then if somebody would be around them, if it wasn't exactly correct, then they'd be like, whoa, you missed a step here. That's not 100%. So they would kind of work off each other, but the core of it was maintained. And so Jesus, spoke in these parables so they could be remembered. He spoke in rhymes. He spoke in ways that resonated in this culture so that it could be spread. And he said the same things again and again and again, making it easy for his disciples to go out, the first time and spread the word. But then everybody who had listened to him be able to basically go out and do the exact same thing. I think we see that ourselves too, when he's putting these, Jesus has given us these parables, and we don't have to get the exact details right, but the stories really stick with us, right? Because the details don't necessarily matter. It's the overall story of what Jesus is trying to sell, to try to say in that story, is that's what matters. So if you sit there and focus on it's this number and this number and this number, is like, realistically it doesn't really matter, but there's a bigger overall meaning when we tell this story that we just got to get it across. So we get into verse 22, and it says they're astonished at his teaching. Right. Again, we don't know what he's talking about. For he taught as one having authority and not as the scribes. And so, this is put, we talked, he's talking with authority because he is the word, right? But this little thing is added on here, is not as the scribes. How do the scribes teach? Does anybody know how the scribes specifically taught and why it's being contrasted like this?
Well,
Yeah,
Matt, did they really teach anything other than reading? I mean, they went in and they, usually read something from Isaiah or something like that, but did they actually teach anything?
Yeah, Christina, you want to say something?
Yeah, so they only taught what they learned from their teachers.
Yep.
So the Pharisees learned from other Pharisees who were above them and only taught what those teachers taught. So never anything that they came up with. It's established thinking.
Yeah, they were basically, what the scribes were doing was they would go in, they would read a chapter, whatever it was, and then they would open up somebody else's commentary and then just read the commentary, word by word. And then if somebody, raised their hand and said, "Hey, I got a question," it's like, it's not in here. I don't know. This is just what this guy from Jerusalem told me to say. That's how they taught. And so, we kind of, if we think about, we put ourselves in the shoes of, of sitting in a synagogue and listening to that, right? This isn't inspiring you, right? Somebody's not saying this with conviction. You ask them a difficult question and they can't answer it. They just have to defer off to somebody. This is not, when Jesus comes in and he's not, sitting there reading off of a scribe, he's saying, these Old Testament teachings from memory with passion and this level of authority that they've never really seen before. There's a massive contrast here, right? This is what's stirring people up. And again, he's doing this on the synagogue. So people that are looking for God have already opened themselves up to see it. And they're like, this feels like it's coming directly from God. When they're sitting here, when the scribes are sitting here and they're reading this to us, it's like, this is coming from some guy in Jerusalem that I've never met, but this guy seems to know exactly what the scripture is saying and what it means and why it's so important and how I can apply it to my life. And that is something that is, a breath of fresh air to them at this point, because there's a lot of difficult teachings in the Old Testament. There's a lot of things that don't make any sense. How do you answer some of these questions that pop up in daily life? And they needed somebody they could ask these questions to, and they didn't want to wait. It's like, well, let me write a letter to a guy in Jerusalem and see what the elders say about it, see if there's a scroll. Jesus came in with this authority, and it's like, you ask me anything and I'm going to be able to tell it to you, and it's not going to just be conjecture. I'm going to say this with absolute authority because, again, I'm the word. I know the word because I am the word, so I can actually teach this to you. I think this is what they were looking for. This is amazing. And we get into this a little bit later. There's a big problem that actually starts happening with the way that these scribes are teaching, is that they start putting the traditions of man above God's commandments and God's laws. And Jesus actually calls them out on this.
Well, Matt, isn't that the norm of most religions today?
I think that no, it is. It's again, Jesus showed us these things, right? Knowing that we were going to face these same problems. Like you read the book of Acts, right? You read Paul's epistles. You look at the things that Paul is trying to get this first century church to straighten themselves up on, and it's like, I see this in my church. Like I've seen this in like I see this happening all the time. These are not new problems. And so Paul understood that. Paul's been trying to fix it. Jesus tried to fix it, gave us the tools, to be able to fix this 2,000 years later. But, the problems that we're having right now in church are not new. They're the exact same that they've always have been there. All right. All right, so let's move on. So talked about that. Okay. All right, so verse 23. So now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out saying, "Let us alone." So I want to stop there. We get this word unclean spirit. This is just referring to a demon, right? It gets used like interchangeably back and forth a couple different times. But anytime we see an unclean spirit, he's talking about somebody that has a demon inside of them.
Mhm.
So how did people know that the man had an unclean spirit? Because I asked myself this question. You got like in situations like this, I think a lot of times you got to put yourselves in the shoes of the story. Imagine yourself as we just watched Jesus talk with authority. Everybody's blown away. They're astonished, and then all of a sudden, we've got this exchange happening right
It
now.
was their action. It was that person's actions that dignified a unclean spirit. It was how they were acting.
The challenge.
Yeah, because Mark's telling makes it seem that the man initiated the dialogue. So this man, being driven by this unclean spirit, goes up to Jesus, says, "Let us alone," right? So I want to read like the rest of I guess not all of it, but so let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Right. So this is what this demon says to Jesus. What do you think he's saying by "let us alone"? Because it's a little tricky here.
Well,
I would say let us keep like the religious like teachings instead of like the actual life that Jesus is teaching.
I think I think that's be a part of it. They like what they got going on right now.
Right. And they know that if unclean spirits don't have a host, if the host is clean.
Yep.
So they're going to lose a lot of bodies.
Yeah.
There's got to be more than one if it's using us.
Correct.
And I think you guys are hitting it, that they think that they've got a good thing going on right now, right? The demon is not. This isn't a demoniac. He's not possessed by multiple demons. We get this eye that gets stated at the end of it. There, he's kind of using this in the royal sense. He's like, "Why are you here, Jesus? Why are you here? Basically, God. You're here to torment us. It's not time." It's not time yet, or is it? Right? They kind of know, right? They know that there's going to be judgment. We see this pop up with the demons. They're not all knowing, but they do understand there will be a day of judgment for them, and they're just hoping. They want it to last as long as possible. That's their goal. I think the big part to remember, off of this is that the devil cannot create. he can't win in the end.
That's
He
right.
knows he knows he can't win. So he's got one consolation prize. Take as many of us out as he can. That's
Right.
his goal. That is his goal. That, you know, misery loves company. We've all heard that before. That is all he wants, right? And so this is what these demons are trying to do. You know, they see everything that's going on. They're like, look at all we're having a feast on souls right now. Right?
Yeah.
These Pharisees are doing exactly what we want them to do. They have locked out everyone from salvation. They overlooked everyone that needs it. People that have opened up their hearts to God, they won't even talk to them. And so we can collect all of these souls.
So, and Matt, no, you can't not remember that he said he cried out. So what was really significant to me was he's in a synagogue. He's kind of cried out. So I would have to believe that's in a loud voice.
Yep.
That he cried out and said at the end, the Holy One of God. So either they thought this guy wasn't identified as an unclean spirit, like he was just a guy that was maybe over exuberant. Leave us alone, you know, you are the Holy One of God. But I have to ask myself, did the Pharisees and Sadducees hear this and question, what is this man saying? Or is he out of his mind? Is he a crazy man? Right?
And I think we see that they probably did. The word of this got around, you know, and you know, we get into this next part. You know, Jesus is, you know, he rebukes him and, you know, says,
Come out of him.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the most significant part, Matt, is that he identifies him that the Holy One of God, and then in front of everybody, he exorcises the demon.
yep, yeah. And I think
That's very profound.
and we get that at the end. People are blown away. They've never seen anything like this at all. You know, and I think it's significant too that the you know, kind of what you're talking about there, Diane, that the demon recognized Jesus, right? You know, everybody else, you know, they know something is different about him. They can tell there's, you know, he's not just a normal man, you know, but they're not quite sure what that means. But then this demon looks at him and he sees past the flesh. He says, "You're the Holy One of God," right? So how do you think that the demon recognizes Jesus, for who he really is?
Well, aren't they all fallen angels?
Yep.
So
yeah.
they know who he is.
Yeah. Jesus is eternal. So Jesus was before them. At
Mhm.
one point they were in heaven together. So they recognized Jesus. They saw him and said, they knew, you know.
And he didn't ask a question, Matt. He didn't ask a question. He says, I know who you are,
Yep.
the Holy One of God.
Yep.
And then Jesus exorcises this demon out of this man in front of everybody.
Yep.
If that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what is.
And that's yeah, I mean, that's, you know, going on to verse 25. So Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet and come out of him." So, you know, why is Jesus saying be quiet though?
Because it's not his
Not
time to
time.
be.
Right, not time.
I think it's not his time because people wouldn't fully understand what the Messiah is, but he also doesn't want this word coming that he's a Messiah coming from demons. That's not
Right.
going to help. That's not going to help him, right? If the only people that seem to recognize him as a Messiah are demon possessed people, you know, it's not going to, you know, play well with the crowds. They're like, well,
Right.
the only people that seem to know he's a Messiah are demons. So is he actually a demon? You know, we get that in chapter 2 where the Pharisees accuse Jesus of
Mhm.
actually being possessed by Satan himself.
Right.
I think the other thing is that he also doesn't want to just say, like, I'm the Messiah. He wants to demonstrate the word by just his acts. Like, he never comes out and says a lot of this in the early on part. He just
Yeah.
he just does things. So it's truly by his actions that he's showing who he is rather than
Yeah. Well, it's I can't remember who I was watching, but it's the story of the man who was born blind that Jesus heals. And the Pharisees had basically made, I think, I'm pretty sure this is in Jerusalem, the Pharisees had made a decree at this point that anybody who declared that Jesus was the Messiah, they were going to be outcast from the synagogue. They were going to be cut off from society. So this is a pretty severe punishment. And so the Pharisees, go up to the man and say, what happened? Like, I don't know what happened, but this man Jesus healed me, right? And then so they go up to his parents and it's like, you tell us what happened. And they kind of like, we're not going to say it. We've got a pretty good idea. They're just like, all I know is that he was born blind and he ain't blind anymore. Right. I'm not going to go any part, past that. You go ask him. So the Pharisees go back to the man. They ask him again. And he's like, I already told you, do you want to be disciples of him too? Is that why you're asking? The Pharisees are like pearl clutching at that point. It's like, how dare you say something to me? It's like, are you a disciple of him? He's like, I guess I am, right? And like he knows the significance of it, so Jesus goes up to the man, he talks to him, and that's he says, do you believe in the Son of Man? And the man says, well, I don't know who that is. And it's like, you've seen him. I am him. I am the Son of Man. He's like, then yeah, I believe because I was blind and I'm not anymore. And so, when Jesus declares that he's Messiah to people, he does, kind of like Jenny talks about, he does something. He shows them. He doesn't just come out and declare it and says, running around screams like, I'm the Messiah. He does something significant and then says, this is what the Son of Man does. This is what the Messiah does. Do you believe now? And not everybody believed, right? But it was the people that did believe. That's, they were willing to risk everything for that. So,
Right.
Yeah, in the prophets, it was like by his works you will know who the Messiah is.
Yeah, and so when John knows he's about to die, John the Baptist, he sends out his disciples, out to Jesus, and he's kind of second guessing everything at this point, right? It's like, this is not exactly what I thought the Messiah was going to be. This is, and so the disciples go to Jesus, and John wants to know, are you the one we've been waiting for? Was you the one that I was supposed to pave the way? He's asking, like, did I do right? Did I follow in the footsteps I was supposed to? And Jesus basically quotes back Isaiah, like you were talking about, Christina, to John's disciples, like the blind see and the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and tell him all these things. And John would have understood what Jesus was saying. And so, this kind of, dives into apologetics here, but there's a lot of I think specifically Muslim apologetics will say that Jesus never declared to be the Messiah. He never declared to be God. He never declared to be divine. It's not true. It's not true at all. You will see it all over the place. He doesn't come out and scream, I'm the Messiah, I'm God, but the things that he does, you can see. There's a point where when Jesus walks on water, and I'm pretty sure that the way that Mark says it, they're afraid, right? They're terrified. They think they see a ghost, and he says, "Fear not, it is I." That's the English translation of it, but in the Greek, it's ego ime. Fear not, I am. That is what he's saying. That a Jew saying I am is declaring to be God. Yeah. Right. So you look at that original text, you look at the Greek, ego ime, I am. That is what he's saying right there, that I am God. I am Yahweh. So there's plenty of places, you just have to look for it. Right. But yeah, Jesus makes it pretty clear to anybody that understands the Old Testament that he is God. Anybody that was paying attention knew that he was God incarnate.
Well, we talked about this, but just like Jenny and Christina said, it was by his works, what he was doing. And we are expected to do the same. His brother James says so.
Yep.
By your works.
Yep.
Yep. And he walked in the authority that and it says it several times. He was walking in the authority. So you had to recognize who he was.
Yeah.
So we got 2 more verses here. So let's try to wrap this up. We'll get you out of here at 9. All right, so Jesus rebukes, says, "Be quiet, come out of him." And then verse 26 goes on. It says, "When the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him." So we get this pretty, violent imagery here. What do you think this is saying? Like, why do you think, the demon reacted the way that it did at this point when Jesus is rebuking him out?
Well, where's he gonna go?
There's no place else to go.
Found out. He was found out, and like Marie just said, where's he gonna go? So
Yeah, he struggles. I think the demon is struggling at this point to resist Jesus's command, and he can't.
Mm.
He absolutely can't. And when God gives a command, he's a sovereign ruler of the universe.
Amen.
There's nothing that can resist that command. And a demon is not. An angel has no free will, really, at the end of the day, right? So when Jesus says get out, it's got to get out. And he
Yeah.
doesn't. It was with a word, right? Be quiet and come out of him, right? There's no magic incantations. Jesus just says those words, get out, and demon tries to resist but can't. So, I think this is another, we're talking about Jesus' divine nature. This shows another part of Jesus' divine nature, that he is able to control these demons with a single word, right? He doesn't have to call down the power of the Father. He doesn't have to do all these long prayers. He just says, get out, and that's it. This is a divine showing of Jesus right here by being able to do this. So then 2027 goes on. Then they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, saying, "What is this? What new doctrine is this?" So again, putting yourself in the shoes, I think that you talked about, Diane, they see everything that's happening, they're just blown away, right? He does this amazing sermon. He speaks with his own authority. He's nothing like what they've seen coming out of Jerusalem. And then we get this dramatic scene as he's basically getting ready to leave, and then people just don't even know what to think. They just know they've witnessed something amazing, and they can't even fathom what it is, right? They start going around. You can imagine the crowds like, what is this? What did we just see? What did we just witness here, right? And they say with a statement like, "For with authority commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him," right? So they're blown away, right? So why are they saying, what is this new doctrine? So what do you think this new doctrine actually is?
You're asking us?
Yes.
Well.
So that I guess the doctrine is that he had enough of an authority to be able to root out demons, and none of the other, I don't know if I only know what they showed you Nicodemus trying to do on the Chosen, but other than that, I don't know about any of the Pharisees or anything rooting out demons. So he definitely had authority to do that, and that's a pretty big authority.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking, Matt? I'm not.
Yeah. No, that's kind of, yeah. I can't find any other examples of this. If somebody's got another one from the Old Testament of being able to cast out unclean spirits, there's talks of unclean spirits. Saul was tormented by an unclean spirit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
David was able to soothe it, but he was not able to cast it out.
Correct.
Right?
So was
So-
Saul.
yeah.
So was Saul with music.
Yeah. So that is like, the most I can really find that, somebody's been able to soothe it, but nobody's been able to say a single word and cast it out. So this is something that, A, nobody has seen, and then B, nobody's even heard of. That's really significant.
And interesting enough, Matt, he allows the scene to take place, but then tells the demon to be quiet about it.
Yep.
So you see that again, he says nothing in word, but he shows it in action.
Yep.
And then I'm just thinking, and I could be way off base, the new doctrine is the start of the church. Even though the church hasn't started yet, it's the start of the church. Because once the Holy Spirit comes, we have that same authority. We've been given that same authority to do that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the start of Christianity.
Yep. Yeah, and so this, again, this is his first miracle of Mark. This is really the beginning of his ministry that we have in Mark. We talked about there's a little bit that happens before here, but he's kicked it off in overdrive at this point. So this is the new doctrine, that, and again, these are the signs of the apostles, as my mom was saying, that he was able to give this authority to the apostles to be able to prove that you follow Christ, that when he sent out the apostles, they were able to cast out demons, they were able to heal, they were able to do all the same things that Jesus was able to do because they were doing it under his authority, right? So this is very new. Nobody has seen anything like this again. And so again, who can give out authority like that? This is again another showing of Jesus's divine nature here, that he's able to do this on his own and then give that authority out to others to do it in his name, right? That's the thing, is like, yes, you're glorifying the Father when you're doing this, but you're doing it in my name. You're invoking the name of Jesus to be able to cast this out.
Yeah.
So and as we see from verse 28, and immediately his fame spread, right? So people, the Sabbath is kind of wrapping up. We'll get into that next week of when we get into like 29 and 32, 33, Sabbath starts to wrap up. People go home. They could just Sabbath day walk, which is about 1,000 feet, I think it is, something like that. So they go home. They're talking about this. They're telling everybody that wasn't able to come, and then we'll see next week that as soon as the sun was down, people are coming up from all over the place. That this is it. They weren't exaggerating when they were saying how fast this spread, that the second they were able to get out of their houses, people are screaming, and it's like, you're not going to believe what I just saw at the synagogue right now. You're not going to believe me. And they're like, all right, well, let me see this for myself. That's what we get into, going into the next sections, is that, it says basically the entire whole city, yes, it's an exaggeration, not every single person, but you get a good chunk of the city coming out, and probably people from around too. There are even probably Roman garrisons coming out. It's like, what are all these Jews up to right now? Like, I've never seen this type of commotion before. People are surrounding Peter's house, just to get a glimpse at Jesus because of what he did at the synagogue. So, and again, it wasn't just the demon being cast out, it really was his preaching too. There's a lot of things that happened that this night at the synagogue, and this really put Jesus' stamp on Capernaum at this point, that something new is here, that Jesus is different, that things are about to change. They might not know exactly what's going on, but they know something new is here, and they want to get on for the ride. So I think that's where, we're going to end off here. That's exactly where I wanted to end off too. So.
All right. Perfect. Marie, you want to pray us out?
Sure.